cool. It was this little dungeon in the basement of the oldest building on campus, had hot water pipes running across top of it. It was hot and humid as hell in there, but I thought it was like the perfect environment. But they would lock the building after like 8 p.m. when the classes were done. So I would just break into the building every night. Then I started college single, but by the time I graduated, I was married with 3 kids. My youngest was born when I was on my clinical rotations. And, but I would go to, classes all day. And then I worked as a pharmacy intern in the evening. So I would go to work from like 5 or 6 p.m. until 11 o'clock at night when the pharmacy closed. And it was like 45 minutes away. I would drive back. I'd get home at midnight or a little after. And then this was actually when I was prepping for my first nationals, APF senior nationals in Detroit in 2000. And I was training alone in the middle of the night, and I would break into the gym every night to break into the building and then to get into the gym. And at first, during the day in between classes, I would go in there and unlock one of the windows on the bottom floor, and I'd climb through the windows at night. And but then they caught on to that, so they started the janitors or whoever was checking all the windows, and all of a sudden they were locked all the time. Well, the building was old, so like a couple of the doors, they locked them, but they didn't lock like super tight. And I realized if I jerked on them really, really fucking hard, I could pop the door open. And so I did that for a while. Well, then they realized I was doing that. So one day I show up and there's all new doors, all new frames with big solid locks on them. Well, I went back to the car, got a fucking crowbar, pried the door open. And it just, whatever they threw at me, like I found a way around it. And one time I actually shattered a door. I didn't mean to, but it might've been the first night they had the new locks on there, and like fuck, hang it in that way. And I knew there was another door like in a little like arboretum area, but it was all glass with a metal frame around it. And this was actually on Christmas break, and it was like cold as shit out. And so I'm jerking on this door really, really hard, and then the glass shatters, and I'm like, oh fuck. And fortunately, like no alarms or anything went off. And I went in and trained, and I figured, well, if security shows up or cops show up, I'm just going to explain myself. Whatever happens, happens. Mm-hmm. Nobody said anything. I don't think they realized at the time, but then there was an article in the school newspaper like a week later about vandals breaking into the building, but they couldn't understand nothing was stolen and nothing was stolen, nothing was damaged. And but I was just thinking, if you guys would just leave me the fuck alone, like just give me a key and let me in. But like in my mind, like the majority of people would say, well, the building's locked and the gym's closed, like I can't train. And the only time I had was the middle of the night. But no, I was just like, no, there's a fucking way. And so no matter what, I was going to find a way in there, and I was going to train. And I'll tell you what, in the middle of the night, I'd get in there. Yeah. At 1 o'clock in the morning, do you think I felt like training? No, I wanted to go to bed. I had to be up early in the morning for classes, but nationals were coming up, and I knew like my goals. And I had always, like in the back of my mind, I always had wanted to be number one in the world. I didn't start talking about that until I was almost there, but that was always the goal. And I'm like, first thing is I need to be the best in the state. Then I need to be the best in the country. And then I need to, eventually work to there. But it was, as it was a long process and took me a long time. But I'm like, this is what champions do. This is what separates me from everybody else who's trying to beat me.
How was your training set up during the military and the college time, because you're on a time restraint?
Yeah. So then honestly, like back then it was more of like kind of what I guess we call today like a power building type program. It was like more of a bodybuilding split, but with heavy bench squat and deadlifts, included in it. And I would train, it just depended like where we were at. Like when we were in the field, I would do things like I would be doing, chins off, pull-ups and stuff off tree branches, and tons of push-ups with loading up my pack with as much weight as I could. And I would do what I called towel workouts, where I'd get a couple of my buddies who were really into lifting, and we would like put our feet against each other and then do rows back and forth or do curls like that, whatever we could, do diamond push-ups and stuff. And, so you did what you had to do. And,
well, say if we're looking at training for the nationals, like how was that? Cause you have to peak for that. You have to do something. So how was that?
I would still like, so even back then, like I kind of realized what worked really well for me was a 16-week block, and I would do it in 4-week waves. And I got a lot of it from Louis' old circa maximal phase. And the first time I had tried that, incorporated bands, I made really good gains. And then over the years, I kind of stuck to that basic platform of having this, progression over 3 weeks, a deload week. And then each wave was progressively heavier than the previous wave. And I would take all my heavy singles and everything.
Are you looking to boost recovery, enhance your sex drive, and improve performance in the gym? Do you think your hormones are out of whack and you're tired of getting the runaround from your doctor? Things like your hormones are just fine, stop lifting heavy weights, etc., etc., etc. I know what that feels like, as I've been down that road most of my life. This is why we've partnered with Marek Health. Marek Health is a premium telehealth platform that specializes in hormone optimization and preventative medicine, ensuring a better quality of life. Marek Health offers a Table Talk panel tailored for our listeners, featuring comprehensive tests like total and free testosterone, sensitive estradiol, and advanced markers like lipoprotein A and IGF-1. These comprehensive panels of up to 84 carefully selected biomarkers allow you to identify areas of enhancement and maximize your physical, cognitive, and sexual performance. It's much different than the panels you may get from your doctor. Choose between self-service options where you can select lab panels based upon decades of experience, or opt for guided optimization with your own health coach. Start with a detailed breakdown of your labs and receive personalized treatment options, both over the counter and prescription. Visit marekhealth.com/tabletalk and use the code TABLETALK to get 10% off your first order. Marek Health isn't just about better health, it's about empowering you to take control of your well-being. Summer's here and so is the heat. I've spent most of my life training in unconditioned gyms, and I know most of you that are training in garage gyms, private gyms, black iron gyms, know what I'm talking about when I say the heat sucks. It kills your motivation to go to the gym, it kills your performance, but it doesn't have to if you keep your electrolytes up. That's why today's episode is sponsored by LMNT. LMNT is a tasty electrolyte drink with everything you need and nothing you don't. This means lots of salt with none of the junk. No sugar, no colors, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, no BS. It contains an electrolyte ratio of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. LMNT can help prevent and eliminate headaches, muscle cramps, fatigue, brain fog, sleeplessness, and other common symptoms associated with electrolyte deficiency. Right now, LMNT is offering a free sample pack with any drink mix purchase. Get yours at drinklmnt.com. This deal is only available through the Table Talk link. Are you tired of sleeping hotter than hell? This was something that I used to complain about all the time. And a few years ago, when I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, he referred me to the Chilipad from sleepme. And let me tell you, it was a game changer. This is why I'm thrilled to announce today's sponsor of the podcast is sleepme. The sleepme Chilipad cooling system lets you customize your sleeping environment to your own optimal temperature, ensuring you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. As you've heard on the podcast, if not every podcast, performance isn't just about how hard we train, it's how you recover, and sleep is vital. The Chilipad creates a cool surface, ensuring temperature no longer disrupts your sleep. It's a water-based mattress topper that works with your existing mattress and lets you control the sleep temperature from 55 to 115 degrees. Imagine falling asleep quickly, staying asleep, and waking up fully refreshed. This isn't just about escaping the heat. It's about enhancing your recovery, boosting your energy, and sharpening your mental edge. Whether it's just you or you and a partner, Chilipad can be customized to suit each person's temperature preference. Visit www.sleep.me/tabletalk to get your Chilipad and save up to $315 with the code TABLETALK. This offer is available exclusively for Table Talk listeners and only for a limited time. Order today with free shipping and try it out for 30 days.
2 weeks out, and then the last week was a deload before the meet, and I found that worked really, really well for me and my training partners, and even my clients today. Like, I still use that same basic template, but it's been tweaked and tweaked and tweaked over the last 20 years, keeping what works and getting rid of what doesn't. But yeah, it was Louis' circa maximal phase that I kind of built my whole training philosophy off of.
And that was with all three lifts?
Yeah. Yep.
So then where was the deadlift in this rotation? Was it with the squat?
No. So I actually trained deadlift on a separate day. For me, like, I never did like the big three together. They were always on separate days. I found that like for the way I trained and the intensity I tried to put in, like I wasn't gonna be able to bring that like with the same three all in one day, not consistently. And I just found that my body got too beat up. So I had a bench day, a squat day, and a deadlift day. And then, but yeah, so I'd build them all up over a 3-week period, deload week. And then on my deload week, I wouldn't deadlift. And then actually later in my career, when I made my best gains in deadlifts, when I first started pulling over 800, I had found that like I got stuck like in the low mid 7s for a while. And I kept blowing out my lower back, kept tearing up my back. And then I finally realized, like I went back, looked at all my training logs. I'm like, what's going on here? And I realized it was when I'd been doing a bunch of heavy lifting and I had all my best deads in competition when I'd had an injury before the meet and had to deadlift less. And then I was like, well, fuck, I need to decrease the volume. And so I started pulling only twice a month. I would deadlift on my first week of my 4-week block and the third week. And then I would take the second week off and the fourth week off. And I put like 80 pounds on my deadlift in a year. And this is when I'd already been competing at a high level. I made, massive improvement there, just deadlifting twice a month. And that's like when I pulled over 800 for the first time. And then my back injuries, like, not that I never had one again, but like substantially reduced. And what I found, and it's funny because people, are always like, oh, when you're taking gear, you recover so much better and your training volume can be more. And I actually found, for me at least, and actually most of my training partners too, that we did better with less volume as we got stronger, because when you're squatting 1,000 pounds in training all the time, it's way more demanding on your body than when I was squatting 500. So I found when I was hitting these really big weights, I needed less volume and more recovery time.
How did the nationals go in Detroit?
Good. So it was my first nationals and I was still drug free at this point, and I placed in the top 3, and that was my goal, to medal there. And I squatted over 800 for the first time, and I totaled over 2,000 for the first time. And those were my big goals going in. So I hit all my goals. I remember my middle son, Garrett, was only 3 weeks old, and he was there in his little car seat while I was lifting. And, but yeah, so that it went well, and things worked out. And like I said, I remember like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I would actually, and this is going to sound, I don't know, it probably sounds like some bullshit ad or something, but I'd be alone in the basement all by myself, and like I'd get down there and I'd be exhausted. And, but I'd look in the mirror and I would have these little conversations with myself, and I'd be like, come on, you fucking pussy. Like, you really want this shit? You're talking about it. Let's see if you can fucking do it. And it would just, I'd get myself worked up. And then once I got going, once I got into the sets, I always felt great. But it was like, getting down there at 1 a.m. and being exhausted and getting going was a challenge. But I would just always, talk to myself, have these conversations and be like, okay, you talk a bunch of shit. Let's fucking prove it.
So how did you balance out those days when you do need to pull back and the days that you have to convince yourself?
That took a while, right? Like, and as you know, and I'm sure you've been in the same place millions of times, it's like knowing when to, you fuck yourself up enough times, you realize like, okay, I should have been smarter there. I should have pulled back, but it's a tricky thing. And a lot of it's just figuring out your body, figuring out your limitations. But like people like us, like, we want no limitations, right? Like, no, there's never an excuse, right? Like, it's always it is tricky, like figuring out when to dig down, when, like with injuries and stuff, it's like I tell a lot of my newer clients that are just really getting into powerlifting and they start getting banged up. And I'm like, get used to it, because this is the way it's going to be. If you want to be really, really strong, now, if you're just doing this for fun, you're doing it for a hobby, or you're doing it for general health, that's a different thing. But if you want to be a competitive lifter, and if you have big goals, you're going to be banged up all the time. There's always going to be little stuff. And it's the same way with jiu-jitsu. You're always going to be hurt. If you took a day off every time you're hurt, you're never going to fucking train. So it's like, but you have to figure out how to train around those things, and what injuries you can push through, and which ones you need to train around, and when you need to shut things down. Like, knowing like when you feel a twinge in your pec or something, and being like, oh shit, like, is a tear about to happen? Maybe I need to shut it down for a day. And then you learn the hard lessons. I've had 5 surgeries to repair lifting injuries. I've torn off both biceps, both triceps, and now my right quad tendon. So yeah, sometimes you cross that line, you push a little too far, but then there's things too, like, sometimes there's this idea that if you have perfect technique and you do everything right, you're never going to get hurt. And that's simply not true. The stronger you get, the higher the level gets, and the harder you push yourself, injuries are going to happen. It's part of it. And I think often what separates people at the very top is who can deal with those injuries and who can't. It's like how many times we see somebody who's a really talented lifter, but everything's kind of come easy. Then they get to the highest levels. They've never had any real adversity. They have one bad injury, career's over. They never come back because mentally, every time they get under that bar, all they can think about is shit, my patella tendon's going to blow off again, or my back's going to blow out again. But for somebody like me, who was a grind the whole way, and I had lots of little injuries and lots of stuff, that was just part of the process. Like for me, I said, hey, it's a bump in the road. I don't fucking care. Like, I mean, when I went into the Arnold the one year, I think it was 2007, I had partially torn my tricep like 2 weeks out doing my last heavy singles. My arm was black and blue from my shoulder to my elbow. And my mentality was, I don't give a fuck. Like, I just hope it holds together for at least one lift. Let me get one bench in. And the funny thing is I actually ended up PRing on bench that meet. And it did tear a little bit more. It was more discolored, but it held together. And then it blew out on me like 3 years later during a photo shoot. But it was just, at that point in my life, the risk was, greater than, or the reward was worth the risk. So it was just like, but yeah, you try to be smart about it and you learn from it. And, but inevitably some things are going to happen, and and try to learn from other people's mistakes too, not just your own.
How did your training change after you graduated?
Not a whole lot really. I continued to probably the same thing. I was fortunate to have some really good training partners during that period. And that was like in the mid 2000s. And like when you and I met and you brought me on, and, I won the Arnold and, became a world. And it was funny becoming a world champion for the first time, because it went from being like a local lifter who only the locals knew to all of a sudden, like everybody knows who you are. And that was kind of an adjustment. But my training it just continued to evolve. I always said training is an evolution, not a revolution. Like people who are like program hoppers, and if you're going to completely change everything every 16 weeks or whatever it is, it's so hard to figure out what works, what doesn't. Like it's so hard to learn from that. And I was always a big proponent of, you keep what works, you try new stuff. If it works, you keep it in. And if it doesn't, you throw it out. And then you're constantly tweaking. And as your strength evolves and your body evolves and things change over the years, there's going to have to be some evolution there too, to accommodate different things. The best program for you when you're at one point in the career isn't going to be the exact best program 5 years later. So it's always constantly evaluating and tweaking, and, it's constantly changing. But I like I said, I found a really good system that worked really well for me and my training partners and my clients. But there's a lot of it too is, program matters, and it's important to, you've got to have some kind of progression. You've got to have some kind of deload in there. And there's a certain way to peak for a meet that works really well. And some people do not. A lot of coaches, that's the biggest thing I find, is very few coaches understand how to properly peak an athlete for a meet. Like it's still a mystery to so many people. And that was one thing I felt like I was lucky and kind of figured out early on. But there's just but if you're completely jumping programs, you never figure anything out. You never learn anything. And I think that's one of the big problems with the current culture of everybody has a coach and you just follow your coach's program. And then when things aren't going perfect, you switch to another coach and they have a completely different style of training. And the thing is, not only is it so hard to learn that way, is that most athletes anymore aren't even trying to learn. It's like, well, I'll just hire a better coach. And sometimes it's like, well, maybe you just needed to stick it out and you didn't give it enough effort, or maybe you're not doing all the things that it takes. Like I said, a good program matters, but effort, consistency, and the mindset you have are more important than having the perfect program. If you look at all the champions, and this is one thing I always did, was I was always studying all the best people, and not just in powerlifting, like in all sports. I was like, what do these people have in common? What separates them? And a lot of it was mindset. They have an unshakable belief in themselves. They have a confidence that that no matter what, they're going to come out on top. Their work ethic is top notch. They're willing to suffer and do more than everybody else. And yeah, sure, there's some genetic freaks that, but those are the exception. Those aren't the rule. The top chain of the majority of the best athletes in the world were always good athletes, but weren't necessarily the greatest. It was when they were able to persevere. They were able to get around injuries. They were the ones that kept, going when everybody else quit. 'Cause there's a lot of great athletes that get to high levels, but then disappear and never reach the top. And it's because they don't know how to deal with adversity.
Yeah, injuries.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of things will put people out. So if I'm understanding you correctly on the training aspect, is you stumbled across a template that was working for you pretty early.
Yeah.
And then what changed over the years was not the template, but the inputs that are going into the template.
Yeah.
To where when you're talking about these lifters that will move from coach to coach to coach to coach, their template changes every single time they move a coach, which is they never learn how to regulate their training.
Yep.
You know, and age will be a regulating factor. Injury is a regulating factor. Strength, you know, the load you're lifting is a regulating factor. And if that one core isn't locked down, then they're fucked. You know, they're limiting what the top potential is going to be.
Yeah.
Because the inputs change. You know, you find what works, you stick with that till it doesn't, then you change that input, and then it just keeps, you know, rolling on down the road from there. Where I see the same thing that you're talking about, you'll see some people that. All right, guys, thanks for watching the video to the end. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and click here, 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 or here for more videos.